Hi, my name is Dana Sardano, and this is the Ubuntu Room. I am so glad you're here. Thank you for joining me. I am fired up today. Let me tell you a little bit about the Ubuntu Room. The Ubuntu Room is a place where we talk all things personal empowerment, all things spiritual development, and everything that falls in between. It's where we recognize that the power is in our hands to create the lives that we desire, and that personal empowerment and spiritual development are actually very much intertwined. And each of us on our own journey of self-discovery fall somewhere on that spectrum. It's my hope that by having these conversations, maybe I'll meet you where you fall, and perhaps we can travel together. So, today, we are talking sacral chakra. Last week, we talked about the root chakra and how imbalances can create issues with safety and security and stability. But today, we're talking sacral. So I wore my chakra shirt today just for a little bit of a visual. I didn't wear it last week because it's freaking freezing in South Florida. There's iguanas falling from trees, and I was, freezing my bippies off, but I wore it today. So this lower one, and I'm not sure if you can see it, this lower one, this is your root chakra, again, represented in red, but the one just above it is your sacral, and that's represented in orange. And the sacral chakra is located in your reproductive area, your no-no region, if you will. And there's something that I think is important before I get into this that we all understand, is I talk about the ages of resonance. Root chakra, age of resonance is 0 to 7, sacral 7 to 14. But there is, and Freddie, this is for you, a fluidity between the chakras. So they all kind of pour into one another. So even if I say that the root chakra age of resonance is 0 to 7 years old, but something tragic happens to me when I'm 8, it can still cause insecurity. So even though I offer this as like a roadmap or a guide, just remember they are fluid, and one pours into the other as they build up the chakra system. So with that said, sacral chakra, represented in orange, greatest age of resonance, 7 to 14, and the aspects of self that correlate with the sacral chakra are your creativity. Now, it doesn't necessarily have to be the idea of, artistry. It's the idea that we're the creators of our reality. Our senses, our pleasure centers, our ability to embrace and enjoy our sensations, our sensuality, our sexuality, our intimacy. Remember, this is all in our reproductive area. Our zest for life, our passion, our excitement. This is all sacral chakra stuff. And if we're either bringing insecurities from our root chakra, or if we have things that have happened that maybe have gone unreconciled, they could create imbalances. Maybe you lack creativity. Maybe you feel victimized. Maybe you have a hypersexuality, or maybe you have no sex drive. Maybe you lack excitement. But the big one is feelings of guilt and shame, feelings of fear, again, that you may carry from the root chakra, and it affects really, truly the enjoyment of life. Now, of all of these things, the one that I think is important, sort of like I wouldn't say a shortcut, but a streamline to living a life of purpose, is understanding that joy is really the barometer for finding our path for our soul's purpose. So if I do something that lights me up, that inspires me, that makes me feel joy, and then that leads to the next thing that makes me feel joy, I ultimately will be on the trajectory to and living through my soul's purpose. But what happens, I think, a lot of the time, is many of us have things that have created these imbalances. Again, it could come from the root, but it could come during the sacral. And what we do is we start to carry guilt, we start to carry fear, we carry shame, and we are less likely to follow that joy, or maybe even if it's so tragic, we may be even less likely to feel that joy altogether. So we develop coping mechanisms, numbing agents, distractions, and we find ourselves on a separate trajectory. And then we grow into adulthood and we wonder why we're depressed, why we're disconnected, why we're unfulfilled, why we're unhappy. And it really traces back to the sacral chakra. With that said, it wouldn't be the Ubuntu Room with Dana Sardano if I didn't share some deep, dark, personal story. So sit tight, because this is a good one. So again, like I mentioned, the sacral chakra, the age of resonance is between 7 and 14. And just on a good day, right, those are tough years going into adolescence for anybody. For me, when I was probably about 9, 10 years old, my father left his career in New York. We were from Jersey. He worked in the city. I think he had a pretty important job. He was like an exec for Chase Manhattan Bank, in Midtown in the city. And, he had difficulty regulating his emotions, and he was a little bit volatile. So I don't know the details of why he left his job, but I know he wasn't happy about it. So our home, and again, I've told enough to know that there was dysfunction there to begin with, but our home, which was uncomfortable on the weekends, was now uncomfortable every day because my father was there full time. My mother being, passive aggressive, my father being aggressive, and it just being uncomfortable altogether. So that didn't take very long for the disintegration, the dissolution of their marriage. So my parents split when I was about 12. My father moved out, and now I'm with my mother and brother in the house that I grew up. Again, also just uncomfortable for reasons that I talked about when I talked about the root chakra. But what happened was my brother and I, in adolescence, my mother not being able to cope, things got a little bit crazy. And my father, after, 6 months to a year, I don't remember the exact timeline, but he offered to come in and restore order. That wasn't distracting. He offered to come in and restore order so that my mother can get her head on straight. So he came in for a couple weeks. My mother left to get her head on straight. So a couple weeks goes by, and my mother never comes back. So my mother's story, is, your father threatened to kill me. And my father's story is, your mother left you for another man. But it doesn't matter. Maybe the truth falls somewhere between the two. But the 12-year-old's message was that my mother doesn't love me. If I was, better, stronger, smarter, whatever, maybe my mother wouldn't have left. So that was the first domino of abandonment issues. So now, again, living with my father, my brother. My brother's a little bit older. He's driving now. He's off doing his thing. And I'm, now in my 8th grade year. And then we go into the summer. My brother's never there. And I'm with my father all the time because he's home, I'm home, and we are fighting all the time. And it was volatile to begin with, but we're fighting all the time. And I'm running away, and I have embarrassing moments in front of my friends and all this craziness. But it culminated in my father taking my dog to the pound as a punishment. So makes me go in. It's like a whole thing. Again, that story is, you read my book if you want to know the details. And it was traumatic, so much so and so dramatic that the police showed up. It was a thing. So I go home with my father, and it was like, this was it. I'm 14 years old. I'm going to get my dog, and I leave. And it was the first time that I ran away that he allowed it. And I was going to get my dog. So again, the details of what happened after that don't matter, but let's just fast forward to the end of the summer. I wind up with my mother now in a 1-bedroom apartment about 30 minutes north of where I grew up with my dog. 2 weeks later, for whatever happened between my brother and father, my brother shows up. Now the 3 of us are in this 1-bedroom apartment 30 minutes north of the house I grew up with the dog and getting ready for school. So I call my father so I can, get my stuff because I'm now living here with my mother so I can go to school. And he said, yeah, come get the stuff, but he had something to prove. So I show up not knowing what to expect. And when I get there, I find 3 big black garbage bags on my front lawn with anything that he could grab and throw in there from the first 14 years of my life. And, sending the message to now the 14-year-old, you're garbage, you should be treated as such. And I grab the bags and put them in the car, and we leave. And again, that set the stage for, remember, sacral chakra, right? That set the stage for all sorts of risky behavior, dipping in grades, serious drug abuse. Let's not even talk about the promiscuity, but all this sort of craziness while I moved into those solar plexus years and furthermore into my adult life. And it was something. To bring it all home, You know, the thing that I find interesting, I'm not sure if you'll find interesting, is that I've talked in the past, and everybody knows I'm an artist and I'm a creative. And as a younger child, that was my thing. Like I would draw and I was very creative. But in this stage of development, in these sacral chakra years, with this trauma, there's a regression to the insecurities, to the instabilities, to those survival skills, and that creativity went dormant. And as I progressed into my adult life, all the patterns were about that instability and insecurity. But somewhere in my late 30s, moving into 40, you know, I have my children, I say 39 and 40, like just as I was like squeaking into 40 years old, I knew I had to do better for them. I knew I had cycles to break. And I wasn't on like this intentional healing journey, but I was doing the things, cutting the toxic ties, you know, looking at the patterns, forgave my father after 2 decades. And it really started to bring me back into alignment. Then I met my schmoopy. I met Rob. And he brought another level of stability, emotional stability, security. And I, like I mentioned a couple segments ago, unzipped that zipper and started to align those teeth and zip it up in a healthy, foundational way. And then I began to paint because I had the freedom now to be creative. And that was the beginning of the newest trajectory of aligned chakras, healthy sacral chakra, and moving forward in a healthy way. And I don't have to tell you, I mean, if you've looked around the studio, if you've seen my body of work, that sense of creativity has done nothing but flourish since. So today I want to leave you, I just one big takeaway other than, again, seeing me completely naked and know my entire life story. But I want you to walk away with this. Always follow the joy. The joy will lead you to fulfillment. It will never steer you wrong. And if you feel guilt and you feel shame and you feel afraid to follow that joy, then it's your job to ask yourself why and unravel that knot. And when you unravel that knot, you will have greater joy. And then when you have greater joy and you follow that, another knot will show up and you unravel that and you will climb it like a ladder. And what you'll find is you will ultimately have fewer knots to unravel, you will have great joy, and you will be living your life in fulfillment. So, thank you for listening. Follow the joy. And as always, Ubuntu.
Wow.